Welcome to Inspired Living with Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector. Every Wednesday, Marc, along with his special guests, will explore thought-provoking topics and ideas that promote creativity, self-help, healing, happiness, and well-being to inspire you on your spiritual journey. Each week, Marc will discuss different paths to achieving a more spiritual, balanced, happy, and healthy lifestyle. Topics will elevate consciousness and range from metaphysics to the human and social experience and all things spiritual. Welcome to an inspired community that offers support, encouragement, and new ways of thinking. Marc is a tested, certified, and professional spiritual medium, metaphysical teacher, healer, and spiritual advisor with a spiritual practice based in Seattle, Washington. You are the inspired and the inspiration.
And good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, wherever you may be in this beautiful planet of ours. You are the inspired and the inspiration. So let's be inspired, let's inspire others, and let's inspire before we expire here on another inspiring episode of Inspired Living, where every moment is an opportunity to ignite your passion and curiosities and embrace the many mysteries, phenomenons, the unknown, the ordinary, and yes, the extraordinary. I am your host, Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, here with you yet again for what I like to call soul adventures in an inspiring episode to explore, discuss, and discover the many diamonds within each and every one of us and the many hidden gems that have yet to be revealed to us and the rest of the world. I'm thrilled to have you join us today as we embark on a journey of inspiration, motivation, and of course, transformation. Whether you're tuning in from the comfort of your home, on the road, or wherever life takes you, this show is designed to uplift your spirit and empower your dreams. Here at Inspired Living, we're all about fostering a supportive and empowering community. And each episode, like today's episode, will highlight incredible guests who have overcome challenges, pursued their passions, and make a positive impact on their respective fields and our amazing and beautiful world. The journey matters, and we want to celebrate your victories, no matter how big or how small. And together, yes, again, together, we can cultivate a mindset of possibility to unlock the doors to our dreams. And inspired listeners can expect engaging discussions, thought-provoking questions, and actionable steps to manifest inspiration into your own reality. Of course, we wouldn't be where we're at without you, the listeners, so we always give a big shout out and say thank you to the inspired listeners and the inspired listening community from around the globe, the universe, and beyond. The team and I here at Inspired Living are so very humbled and grateful to you for listening, downloading, subscribing, leaving reviews, and voting to make Inspired Living not only a best inspirational show, but also a best spiritual show to follow and listen to as referenced by FeedSpot. So we really appreciate it. And of course, we really appreciate you. If you've not yet subscribed, liked, or followed the show, there's always a time to do so over on our main social media platforms at Facebook. Just look for Inspired Living radio and podcasts, or Instagram, Blue Sky, and X, formerly known as Twitter. Just look for the handle Inspired for Us. That's the number 4, Inspired for Us. And of course, you can always follow us over on our YouTube channel, Inspired Living, and we are now streaming through Audible or wherever you get your favorite podcast from. So get ready. Take that nice inspirational deep breath to be inspired, uplifted, encouraged, and motivated, because I always like to say the best is always yet to come. So let's go prospecting together, shall we? So today, for the first time, we have a guest joining us. She is an author and a still state meditation and mindfulness instructor. Her name is Miss Marcy Westcott, and she talks about not only meditation and mindfulness, but how to journey and navigate this world we seem to find ourselves in. A little bit more about Marcy. She, like I said, she's a meditation and mindfulness teacher, author, speaker, and retreat leader who helps people find the calm, the clarity, and the resilience in the midst of life's storms. So if you're listening to this episode, you found the right episode if you're in the midst of life's storms and looking for a little calm and clarity. Her journey into mindfulness began not at a monastery, but through navigating personal crisis, where she discovered mindfulness as both survival and transformative. For more than 8 years, she has guided professionals, wisdom, and spiritual seekers, and everyday people to reconnect with their inner wisdom through accessible practices that bridge science and spirit. And they do go hand in hand. Spirituality and science go hand in hand, and I couldn't agree more. She is the author Searching for Sanity, How I Overcame Crisis with Mindfulness, and How You Can Too. And the book has been praised for making mindfulness practical and relatable, and the creator of retreats like Soul Legacy, where participants can step away from their daily demands to realign with what truly matters. She's a 2023 NAWBO Women Business Owner of the Year finalist, and she is the winner of the NAWBO 2025 Inspiring Woman of the Year Award. So congratulations on that. We're happy to have her on the show today. And at the heart of work is her core belief that anyone can simply sit down, close their eyes, and in the stillness access their true inner nature, finding presence, compassion, and courage along the way. If you want to learn more about Marcy and her journey and what we're talking about today, you can visit all of our social media sites. You can also go to her main website, thestillstatemeditation.com. And with that, Marcy, welcome to Inspired Living. Thanks for being with us today.
Thank you so much, Mark. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, so first and foremost, congratulations on the NAWBO Women Business Owner of the Year finalist and Inspiring Woman of the Year award. So that's always nice to be recognized for your work, because sometimes it can be a lonely journey. You're doing this and you've found the answers, but then being recognized for your book or your accomplishments, your journey, I think is very important, because it shows us that we're all on the right track and that we are changing lives, even if we're changing one life at a time, not the entire world, right? So congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
So tell us, just introduce yourself to the Inspired Listening audience around the globe. We got people tuning in from all around the world. So give us some insight about who you are and why you do, and maybe that storm that you went through that people can relate to where you started looking into the stillness and silence, or as I like to say, just being a human being.
Yeah, well, thank you. It was honestly, I call it divine intervention. I truly believe that with every cell in me. I discovered meditation. I think it was always in the works. It was something that I was meant to, self-actualize. It was really a process of self-actualization. And I can remember as even a young girl being, questioning things that, maybe the average 8 or 9-year-old doesn't question. And it wasn't until almost the third chapter of my life that self-actualization actually took place. It's always interesting to me how things happen on the universe's timetable, not ours, right? It manifests on the universe's timetable, and so one of the rules of manifestation is to plant the seed and then get out of the way and let the universe do the work. And again, it's not always on our timetable. But I had a big corporate career, 20-year corporate career that absolutely was everything that you would, expect being on the fast track. It was really back at a time when the Me Too movement wasn't even a blip on anybody's radar. And so I was in a very toxic type of work culture. I was in the top 10% of performers in my industry, and I made an incredible income, but I worked 70 hours a week. I had 1 day off a week. Usually I didn't get to take that. And in 20 years, I had, 2 weeks of vacation a year, but I was never able to take it back to back. And, like I said, the workplace culture was really toxic. After about 15 years, working at that kind of pace and that kind of environment, my health started to suffer. I developed high blood pressure, insomnia, digestive issues, and at one point I was taking medication for anxiety. All of that was a result of not being able to, manage the stress and the pressure in my job. And so one day, in year 18, I had a major medical crisis come literally out of left field. It was, absolutely just something that rocked my world. And, we know that attitude is a contagion, right? So when we are experiencing a lot of disruptive emotions and that kind of thing, that's contagious to the folks around us. So trying to navigate that first medical crisis was really, really traumatic. And it not only was I suffering because of it, but so were, the people around me. And so fortunately it resolved. It was kind of the best of what a bad situation could be. But after that, and after the recovery, my husband and I really realized that there was so much more to life. And, we were really missing out. So we decided to make a major change. We came to Central Texas in the hill country where we live. And we went from the big city and the, home and the fancy subdivision and having all the trappings, that go with that. And then absolutely going to the complete opposite. We built a very small, modest home right in the middle of nature, no neighbors really around us. And it was quite a change of pace, so to speak. And that really started the journey to me realizing why I was here, what I was supposed to do, and then putting that into action.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And you said the C word, the corporate world, definitely can relate to that. I use the F word. I used to work for the federal government for many years, and I just recently retired this last year. So the F word or the C word, two things that really can jeopardize your health. And I love that you had the awareness, because awareness is the greatest agent for change, right, Marcy? And you had the awareness to say, you know what, I can't do this grind. And if you think about it, we're the only species that pays to live here. And one of the quotes that's actually coming to my mind as we're having this discussion about health. Because without your health, money is worthless, right? And I know the Dalai Lama talked all the time about, man, because he sacrifices his health in order to make money, then he sacrifices money to recuperate his health. And then he's so anxious about the future that he does not enjoy the present, the result being that he does not live in the present or the future. He lives as if he's never going to die, and then dies having never really lived, right? That's the Dalai Lama that reminds us. And so, for the listeners out there, think about your job. Are you working in a toxic environment? Is it having an impact on your health? Because the word disease, if you break it down, disease, we get disconnected from ourselves. And that's where we get into the everything that you just described, and that you had the courage too, right? I think it takes courage and awareness to walk away from that high paycheck that we get, right? But at the end of the day, we don't get to take anything that we work so hard to accomplish. We don't get to take that with us, right? And, I've learned about the corporate world and the federal government. You're easily replaced within 30 days. If something happens, you go over and make your transition to the other side. They have your position posted within 30 days. And it's just a grinder. It's a meat grinder, right? And so I commend you for having the leadership and the awareness and the courage to make that leap of faith, because that's not easy to do. And most importantly, I love that you got back to nature. You said, whereabouts in Texas are you?
We are about 50 miles north of San Antonio. We're kind of right in the middle of San Antonio and Austin, so we can go about 50 miles either direction and be in a major metropolis. And but I've always been drawn to nature, even as a child. And it's well, in nature one finds oneself, right? And I definitely found myself in nature for sure.
Yeah, and it's interesting because even this last week, I do a lot of prospecting in my spiritual journey, not just the podcast, but and I came across an article that talked about how the bond, which researchers call the nature connectedness, has declined with this generation more than 60%. Most people are not getting back out in nature and not connecting, not getting on walking, staying in their house and gaming, or watch streaming whatever streaming channel. There's multiple streaming channels now, but it was an interesting study because it says that 60% it has declined by more than 60%. And nature is our greatest teacher, and people forget that nature is our first original home. Nature is the greatest engineer, the inspirer, the healer. And so we wonder. Well, I don't wonder. I actually know why we have so much chaos and dis-ease in our consciousness, is because we've really disconnected to getting back to nature. The forest makes your heart gentle. You become one with it. And so I'm so glad that you found your way back to nature, because that's probably been a big difference in your health today, right? If we did before and after, where are you at now on your health journey?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's something that obviously we talk about interconnectedness so much in meditation, and what that means. And all we have to do is look to quantum physics to understand that. And so it's something that if we can, really let go of all of the materialism, the expression, you don't own your stuff owns you. And that was
so true.
that was so true for me. Letting go of all of that was really an incredible experience of just lightening the load. And, from that point on, once I actually stepped onto the journey of becoming a meditation teacher, everything changed. And insights, really understanding why we're here, what we're meant to do, who we really are, all of those things are really kind of the core of my work as a teacher.
Yeah, so let's jump into that. Let's go prospecting for some diamonds there, because there's a lot to unpack. For some of the inspired listeners, I know some of my subscribers and fans know the journey of meditation very well, but there might be somebody listening to this podcast for the first time or years down the road. How would you define, in your definition as an instructor of meditation, what is the difference between meditation and mindfulness? So let's start there, just so we can kind of carve it out for the layman that's listening to this and has no idea what meditation about or what is mindfulness about. What is the difference between the two of them?
Well, so here is the definition of meditation. And when I graduated from my training, I made a vow to myself that I would always take the opportunity to give someone the definition, because there's so many misconceptions around it, right? It is at its very core, meditation is a technique or a practice that settles your nervous system and trains your brain to become more focused, more engaged, more responsive, and less reactive. Now, in essence, that is what it is. It can be as secular and as straightforward at one end of the spectrum as it can be esoteric, metaphysical, and spiritual on the other end. And it can be anything in between. I feel like one of the miracles of meditation is that it really meets us where we are. And when I graduated from my training, it really felt like, because I had, all of this corporate business background, that I was meant to, kind of walk that secular path. And that has proven to be true. But I'll come back to that in just a moment, because I really want to make a point there. Now, the definition of mindfulness is paying attention to what you're doing while you're doing it with a non-judgmental attention. And that simply means without evaluating it or analyzing it. So we don't decide if we like something or we don't like it, we want it or we don't want it, it's right or it's wrong, it simply is, right? And when we sit down in meditation and mindfulness merge. They kind of marry each other. Generally, you will have something that you're focused on in your meditation. And so we sit down, we focus on something, and we pay attention to that, and we do it without judgment, hopefully.
Hopefully, yeah.
Hopefully.
Yeah, because that's a good one, right? Because who's the one person we talk to the most in our life? Ourselves, right? And we have to have mindfulness of what kind of conversations are we having with ourselves? Are we inspiring ourselves? Are we self-sabotaging ourselves? Are we judging ourselves? Or just, as Buddha talked about, letting it go? And so I think that's an important part, is the inner voice and what stories we tell ourselves on this journey of life, right? So thank you for breaking that down.
Yeah, sure. That absolutely informed my life early on. I was the queen of negative self-talk. I call it the bad roommate. Okay. I call it the bad roommate. It's that roommate you can't get rid of, right? It has an opinion about everything, everyone, especially you, and it's always weighing in. You can't get rid of it so often, and it's at the very least annoying, and at the very worst, it can be toxic. And for me, it really became a toxicity that was informing my life. Fortunately, meditation took bad roommate and turned it into what I call inner knowing. And that inner knowing is what your heart and your soul really have to say in a compassionate, loving, kind way, guiding you toward where you are really meant to be. And we can sometimes be very surprised by how that all manifests.
Yeah. And, for the listeners out there, I always remind them, you're going to have your ego until you transfer into what we call death. The ego is there for a purpose and a reason, for logic and reasoning and, competition and protectiveness. But you don't have to listen to the voice of the ego every minute of your life. And I have found through mindfulness and meditation in my own journey, how to become aware of the ego. I teach my students this all the time. Think of a person, place, or thing that you just don't like or resonate with, and name your ego that. So at times when you're, for example, when I'm aware of my ego, I name it Igor, like in the movie, the little Igor that's telling him, master, you need to do this. And it's like, there's a place and time for ego in this very difficult journey of life and the chaos of life. But there's also times through meditation and mindfulness that you can address your ego and say, you know what, ego, just step outside for a few hours or 30 minutes and allow me just to connect to the human being experience, right? So it's a good way of bringing awareness to our ego, but getting rid of the ego, that's really never going to happen. I remember when I started my spiritual journey, Marcy, people were like, oh, you got to murder your ego. You got to get rid of your ego. And I've tried for years, but it still at times comes back, and it's there for a reason and a season, but it doesn't need to be there every minute of your life. And so that's a good way to identify the ego in the human experience. And so for you as an instructor, what do you feel that meditation, the role of meditation, how does it play in connecting us to something larger than ourselves, be it spirit, source, divine, heaven? Everybody has a different connotation or name or label for it, or no belief at all, right? That's part of the journey. But what role would you say meditation plays in connecting us to something bigger than ourselves?
I think it once again goes really back to what I say over and over again when I'm talking or teaching, people, is discovering who you really are, peeling back the layers of who we really are. And so much of what my experience with meditation, particularly as not even just a teacher, but as just a meditator, is that it has really helped me discover that spiritual aspect of meditation, understanding how we can savor life more. And I am a big believer in synchronicity. I'm a big believer in following your intuition. That really is what inner knowing is. And as women, you men have it too, but as women, intuition is one of our superpowers. And if we just treat that as, what it is, it's your internal guidance system. It's there to guide you, to, take you to what you're meant to do, what you're meant to be. And if we follow that, it's like the most powerful GPS you could have in your car, but this is inside you. And when you follow your intuition, in my experience, it will never turn you away. It will never, take you to a wrong turn, so to speak. It's interesting to me when I listened to one of your past episodes with Michelle Blood, and this is what
great show.
This is what I really appreciate about how meditation has. You talked about awareness, made me aware of so many of the things that we might not see otherwise. As we step onto the path and we start to evolve. These synchronicities start to come up. And when I was listening to that episode, it felt like the universe was kind of tapping me on the shoulder, because you were talking about the ordinary and the extraordinary. Those are exact words that I had an experience with the death of my grandmother at a service. It's something I talk about and teach in a writing class that I do. And so there was a synchronicity there when I heard you say that. You talked about soul adventures, and the soul is something that I spend a lot of time, talking about with my clients. And I lead a retreat, called Soul Legacy, and I teach a writing class called Soul Synchronicity. And so that was another. I like to call it following the breadcrumbs. Right? It's like a path of breadcrumbs, and if you follow them, they're going to take you someplace extraordinary. And then you also brought up one of my favorite quotes of all time, and I use it all the time when I'm teaching, from Lao Tzu. At the center of your being, you have the answers, you know who you are, and you know what you want. And so it's really peeling back the layers and discovering what our true inner nature is. And our true inner nature is peace, love, joy, compassion, gratitude, and inclusiveness. It's really the difficulties and the challenges of life that mask that. And, something like adopting a meditation practice and really, learning to make that part of your life will absolutely, take you to all of that, what you're meant to do and what's below all of those layers.
Yeah, or as I like to say, prospecting for the diamond within and the many hidden gems that are all around us. So, and for the listeners out there, everything that Marcy and I are talking about today, it sounds easy, but it's not always an easy journey. And if it was easy, everybody would be doing this. That's the one thing that I've learned. And you talked about synchronicities, which I love Einstein. And I'm paraphrasing here, but he always talked about that the synchronicities and coincidences of life are God's way of remaining anonymous, whatever, whoever God is for you. But that bigger picture of what happens after this journey that we call life, the physical journey ends, what is the next step, right? And meditation can really unlock some of those doors and those questions in your higher self. So we're going to go to our break, but when we come back, we're going to get into talking about the silence, the doorway to spiritual awakening with Marcy Westcott, our special guest today. And I hope that you stick around because we have some real diamonds to reveal here in the next part of this episode. So stick around. This is Inspired Living, where you are the inspired and the inspiration. Will be back here in 2 minutes.
The future of internet radio is here. Om Times Radio, IOM FM. Host your show on IOM FM, the radio network of Om Times Media, one of the more recognized brand names in the conscious community, and is backed by the extensive marketing reach of Om Times. Hosting a show on IOM FM immediately connects you with our extensive dedicated community.
My name is Victor Furman. Some call me The Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me Wednesdays at 8 p.m. Eastern on Om Times Radio, and we'll explore these topics and so much more on Destination Unlimited.
One planet, 7.3 billion people, only one you. Life offers us many opportunities and learning experiences. Are you ready to explore and discover this beautiful planet, the life and energy all around us, the spiritual world, and what is unseen, along with your own personal soul adventure? Marc Lainhart, the Intuitive Prospector, is the spiritual connection you have been prospecting for. Internationally known as a tested and professional clairvoyant medium and spiritual advisor, Marc's work as a metaphysical teacher, medical instructor, radio show host, inspirational writer, and hiking guide are here to help you on a journey of self-discovery, healing, inspiration, education, and a whole lot of spiritual awesomeness. Dare to dream. Dare to explore. Dare to live. For more information on Marc's spiritual practice in Seattle, Washington, please visit marclainhart.com or internet search The Intuitive Prospector.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free. AscendingHearts.com.
You came across someone struggling with hunger. How would you recognize them? Would you notice an 8-year-old girl who's not excited for summer break
because she may not be having lunch again until September?
Or a war veteran who's having a hard time landing
a job and getting back on his feet?
I am the 1 in 8 Americans who struggle with hunger. I am hunger in America.
Hunger can be hard to recognize. Learn why at IamHungerInAmerica.org. Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
Hey, prospectors, welcome back to Inspired Living. Carl Sagan famously stated, "Science is not only compatible with spirituality, it is a profound source of spirituality." And our special guest today, Marcy Westcott, is taking us through the journey of meditation and mindfulness. She is the author of Searching for Sanity, How I Overcame Crisis with Mindfulness and How You Can Too. She's a meditation and mindfulness teacher, author, speaker, and retreat leader. If you want to learn more about our guest today, you can go again to all of our social media platforms, and you can go to the main website, thestillstatemeditation.com. So, Marcy, welcome back. Let's talk about the stillness, because I love, the quotes from Rumi or Lao Tzu: the more silent and still you become, the more you will actually start to hear. And that took me years to identify that. But how can silence in meditation, from your perspective as a certified instructor, how can that become a doorway to the spiritual awakening for those that are either just starting the journey of awakening, those that are still dormant, plugged into the matrix, or those that have been on this journey like myself for several years now?
Yeah, you brought up that quote, and it reminds me of one that I use all the time in my teaching, and that's: silence isn't empty, it's full of answers. And so when we sit down in meditation and we begin to let all of the chatter, all of the wild horses that our thoughts are,
the monkeys, the wild monkeys.
Yeah, monkeys. I'm a horse person, and so I always relate it to a herd of wild horses that we're trying to rein in, right? It's something that you can finally begin to hear, that little whisper of your intuition or inner knowing. And I know that it's been remarkable for me. It all starts to kind of come together. It all starts to kind of meet in the center. This being connected to nature, listening to our inner knowing, that inner wisdom. All of the noise from the outside world. When we sit down and we close our eyes, the outside world takes a back seat, and we become more familiar with this internal landscape that we have. And in my practice, in training, I had something called a peak experience. I'm sure you're very familiar with peak experiences in your work.
Yeah.
And that was something that was truly remarkable for me, because you've heard the expression, silence can be deafening. Well, it absolutely can go to another level. I had a peak experience in nature on a reserve, kind of a sanctuary, and I was standing in front of a small lake, and it was absolutely stunning. It was like something that just fell out of a coffee table book. And it struck me suddenly that the silence was not just the absence of sound. It was a sensation that I could start to feel in my body. It sounds, I know, wild for someone who maybe hasn't had that experience before.
Not yet.
But I noticed that there was no sound. The wind in the trees, I could see the leaves moving, but there wasn't any sound there. The birds weren't singing. The sun was shining. It was a gorgeous day, and suddenly, from the bottoms of my feet, I started to feel this vibration. And it grew stronger and stronger. It started to rise up through me. And when it reached about, I would say shoulder height, I could feel myself connected, literally physically connected, spiritually connected to everything around me. And I didn't know what had happened. I thought, what is going on? And then in talking with my teacher about it, it was a peak experience. And people have those, the more connected you become to your inner knowing and to nature, the more these experiences will begin to exhibit themselves. And in my experience, it is as real as you and I sitting here right now talking.
Yeah, no, that's a great perspective, and thank you for sharing that. Now, you use the word intuition a couple times, and I love the word. I love how we use words in our modern day vocabulary. But for you listeners out there, you pay tuition to go invest in something, whether it's a trade school or a college school. We call that tuition. And then you have this thing called intuition, which is a Latin. It actually comes from the Latin word intuito, which means contemplation, which is derived from the Latin verb meaning a gaze at or to look at. So in a sense, if you can, I always remind my clients and my students, if you take the time to disconnect, again, from society, from social media, from the news outlet, from all the chaos in the world, if you take the time to disconnect and you make the time to reconnect, that intuition of investing in yourself will start to unlock doors. The higher voice, the higher self, that event that you just described of sitting in that stillness and that silence, because people don't realize from a spiritual and science standpoint, and we'll kind of shift a little bit into the science aspect, when you're moving, the brain actually becomes quite dormant. But if you can sit still, and I go back to my childhood when, because I was a pretty active child, my mom would say, sit on your hands, sit still. And we found that to be very hard to do, very disruptive. But when we move into the stillness, the conscious brain is not as active. It actually starts to fire on a different level just based on, stillness, like the same with sleep. When we go to sleep, the mind is more active awake, or more active asleep than it is in awake, what we're doing right now. And so, it's the word was first, intuition was first recorded, I believe, in the mid 15th century. But it's a direct, immediate knowledge to your spiritual perception. So for the listeners out there, take that time to disconnect so you can make that time to reconnect through your intuition, and you'll be surprised at some of the things that actually unfold through the stillness, through the silenceness, and maybe just not talking so much in life, right? And maybe listening more. So
absolutely. And I think if I could just kind of dovetail on that, I think that one of the gifts of meditation is how it can help us learn to be self-compassionate, to understand that we have to be gentle with ourselves. And it's interesting because intuition, I mentioned that voice, that inner knowing, is like an internal guidance system, like a GPS in your car. Well, when we talk about, we could talk about it as a compass, right? Your intuition steers you to where you're supposed to be. It's there to guide you and to help you. And if you think about the word compass, those are the first six letters in the word compassion. So those two things actually,
interesting.
That interesting. Yeah. You were talking about silence. Einstein is my guy, right? He was really one of our most mindful geniuses, and he said, I think 99 times and find nothing. I stop thinking, swim in silence, and the answer comes to me. And that has just been true over and over again for me and for my clients.
Yeah, and I love Einstein's story too, because he did not come from academia. He actually was a patent clerk. He came from very humble beginnings and started to write papers, like the theory of relativity, and he started to disrupt the status quo of the elites and the academia, saying, who is this guy? Who is this Einstein? I don't know if he was from here or a different timeline. I don't know. I'm not convinced. But, there are people like him. There are people like Da Vinci. There's people like Newton. There's people like Nikola Tesla. They all connected to something, that the modern day society doesn't connect into. And some of their theories and hypotheses have now come to pass, especially with Einstein. Things he was predicting 60, 70, 80 years ago is now in today's technology being confirmed through scientific method, through mathematics. So he was tuning in. So there's a lot of information to be gleaned if you take the time. But a lot of us don't take the time to disconnect. We're going, like you in the corporate world, and family and your career and marriage and mortgages and children, and just it's almost like drinking from a fire hose. And so it's really important. And again, I come back to nature. Nature is my religion. Nature is my church. Nature helps us get to that place of just taking that nice deep breath, that nice moment, right? And real quick, I'll just share, speaking with silence, I've been working with plant medicines at a very deep level since my retirement from the F word, the federal government. And I had a moment working with the plant medicines that they removed into during the ceremony, removed into what they called the sacred silenceness. And Marcy, I'll tell you, it was so silent, it was deafening. That probably doesn't make sense to the listeners. Yeah. But we were sitting in the silence, in the sacred silence, with the intention of being intuition, sitting in the silence, and it was literally deafening. It was like I was at this concert of just loud stillness and silence, but it was absolutely like, it was one of those moments you were just describing. For me, it was one of those moments to be like, oh, how can silence be so deafening? Well, if you apply the right tools and the right awareness.
Yes, and you brought up. Sorry, I didn't mean to step on your words. I apologize.
No.
You brought up hidden gems, right? Another synchronicity in your intro that I heard when I was listening to that podcast. I do a talk on. I call them the hidden gems of meditation. Now we know that most, 90% of people come to meditation for three things: stress, anxiety, and sleep. And those are three of the most important reasons you could ever come to meditation. But there are 138 other researched, empiric reviewed benefits to meditation, one of which is creativity. And that is something that I am really working with, at this point in my teaching career. We talked about Einstein, and Beethoven would go for a walk. Pablo Picasso would take a bath. Leonardo da Vinci would just kind of go away, and Albert Einstein would stop thinking and swim in silence. Now, what all of those creative geniuses had in common is they were they were using mindfulness to spark their creativity. And I can tell you now, after all of my years of meditating, when I sit down, I can become wildly creative in meditation. Now, I know what to do with those thoughts, right? That's part of what we learn when we are becoming a meditator. And what I've come to realize is if something that creative spark or that idea is supposed to stay with me, I'll remember it outside of meditation. If not, it's probably going to show up at some other point in time. But the whole theory around creativity is really becoming fascinating with me because it is an energy like gravity. And when there's probably a lot of people have had the experience where you have a great idea about something, right? But you don't act on it right away. And maybe, a week goes by, you still haven't put that great idea into play. Before you know it, months have gone by, and then suddenly one day you see someone who has put that idea that you had out into the world. And you think, why didn't I do that? Well, creativity is just looking for a host to express itself. And so if we don't seize that and, take that and act on it, we're going to lose it. And it's going to go somewhere else and, manifest in someone else. And so I think that whole kind of, that's very metaphysical, right? It sounds very esoteric, but I have experienced that over and over again.
Yeah, myself as well. And, it goes back to that inner voice too, that we were talking about earlier in the show, that, you've got to learn to control the best you can, round up the horses, round up the monkeys. But that inner voice keeps people from, stepping off the ledge, that leap of faith, if you will, to have the courage to learn how to fly. And so for listeners out there, it's a reminder, what are you telling yourself? And that may be holding you back from the dreams that are just right on the cusp of being discovered, but you're holding yourself back through the ego, through the self-sabotage. So, anytime there's a fear-based energy, I always remind my listeners, fear is false evidence appearing real. So you might as well face everything and rise and see what happens. Because you're right. If you don't take action, if you don't seize the day, right? Carpe diem, if not now, when? If you don't seize on that, then the consciousness and the knowledge will go to somebody else, and you'll be like, why didn't I create Amazon? Why didn't I create Microsoft? Why didn't I create the internet? Why did all these things? But at the end of the day, it's not about the money. It's about the journey, because these concepts that we're talking about today, these aren't new concepts. These are ancient philosophies and modalities that have been practiced for centuries. And I think we've just become more distracted with our technology and, things that are keeping us away from tuning in. So again, take that time to disconnect so you can make that time to reconnect.
Yeah.
So for the listeners out there, how do you, in times of crisis, because I came to meditation through my college, actually, I was actually taking a sports medicine course, and visualization, meditation, and manifestation for the professional athlete. It had nothing to do with what I do today, but I was also in a period of crisis and severe grief and suffering, which I call today the trauma and tragedies that really changed my life. But for our listeners out there, from your perspective as an instructor, how can meditation open us up to a deeper sense of trust in life's unfolding? Because it is the word trust. You can do and you cannot do, as Yoda reminds us, there do or do not, there is no try, right? But how can we trust and unfold through the meditation process of what you know as a mindfulness and meditation teacher?
Well, here's what happened for me. After I burned out of my career and we came to Texas and I immersed myself in nature, it became apparent that I was really still suffering from all of the stress and the anxiety that I had accumulated over that 20-year career. And one day I went to town to see, that's what you do when you live in a small town, right? And you live in the country, you go into town. So I went into town to see a friend of mine, and she said, hey, there's a new yoga teacher in town. Let's go to her class. Now, the town I live in, Blanco, is a very small town. We were about 1,500 people at that point in time. And when there is a new yoga teacher in town, it is breaking news. And it wasn't just, your regular yoga class. It was Kundalini yoga, which is even more, esoteric, right? And so I didn't really like yoga at the time. I didn't really want to do it, but she really wanted to go and I wanted to support her. So I said, okay, we'll go. We went the next night and I meditated for the first time and the doors blew open for me. It was the most profound experience I had ever had. And it felt like someone had lifted 1,000 pounds of weight off of me that I had been carrying around for all those years. Interestingly enough, and this is something that is fascinating, people are conduits for us, right? This is one of my closest, best friends. She was the conduit for me stepping onto the path of meditation. We went to that yoga class that night. I kept going back. I didn't miss a single class in about 3 years. She went a couple of times and then never went back. That class was not for her. It was for me.
Was for
and
you.
she was the conduit. And so, I started practicing every day. And within about 8 weeks, all of my physical ailments had resolved. And, that was really the beginning of, the self-actualization. So.
Well, and I love how you said from your perspective, from your opinion, and that's what I tell my lay listeners and my students all the time is like, I can offer you my perspective and my experience, like, for example, working with plant medicines, but until you actually step up to the plate and experience it for yourself, we always say you can lead a human to knowledge, but you can't make them think. There's still that free will and choice that applies that you had to, and I'm glad that you found that Kundalini. We've had conversations on this show about Kundalini and have, had guests talk about, the experience of Kundalini and the energy and the frequency and the vibration of working through movement, right? The movement of the body. Yeah. But, when you get into meditation, the Buddha reminds us too, that this is a mental development and you use it or lose it. It's with anything. If you can't get into a disciplinary, dedicated program to meditate, you're not going to go deeper into what Marcy and I are talking about today. So it becomes a daily meditative practice to also get into that stillness and that silence. Would you agree with that as far as just the discipline and the dedication to do it?
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with that 100%. And, what motivated me to write my book was in 23, I had a series of crises back to back to back. Three different crises, all separated by about 3.5 weeks. And exactly, right? There's another, there are no coincidences, another synchronicity. And one of those crises was the return of that major medical crisis that I had 20 years before. This time it was much, much more worse, much more serious. And had I not had my meditation practice, there's no question I probably would have had a nervous breakdown. But it was 360 degrees different from the first time because I had the tools, I had my practice to turn to. And so this is what really motivated me to write the book. So many people go through day-to-day, life, not managing just the normal stress that we all encounter. When a crisis comes in from out of left field, we're completely unprepared. So having had that experience and having had those practices to turn to, it can absolutely change, everything. I meditated, in an ambulance on the way to the hospital. I meditated in an MRI machine. I meditated as I was going into surgery. And, my mantra was trust, gratitude, acceptance, and compassion. And I repeated that over and over and over again and just tuned into that. And, thanks to inner knowing and thanks to the power of the practice, it changed everything for how those experiences landed. And I think that is really the message that I would want to leave with your listeners is, we have the power inside us to heal ourselves. We can't emphasize it enough. It's a gift, and if we can just tune into that, we can really overcome anything.
Yeah, well said. And yeah, we're born into life, and life is going to be stressful just at its root cause. Life is stressful, and having those tools, like you said, is very important. But you had to, again, through your free will and choice, you had to show up to the Kundalini yoga class. You had to start a dedicated practice to get better at those tools, right? It's the universal law. What, use it or lose it. What you put in, you get out. It's that same, construct. And, for the listeners out there, it's a reminder that you do have, that Marcy's talking about today, you do have that power. So be careful for what you ask for, because, transformation is not always an easy pathway. I always think about the caterpillar to the butterfly scenario in the spiritual practice. The caterpillar literally deliquefies into a big sack of protein goo. And what the caterpillar calls, oh my God, this is the end of the world, because now I'm just a goo state. I don't know. And then it morphs through the cocoon into the beautiful butterfly, which gives you a whole different perspective. So, I found, even just in my own journey, and I've been doing this for a while, I've had 5 major surgeries since last April. And the meditation practice in the mindfulness practice has helped me get through some very transformative, ways of my being. But I asked for transformation. So it comes back to be careful for what you ask for. And if you are asking for something, be direct with it. Be descriptive of what you want your transformation to look for. And then, of course, patience and trust. I love that you had the mantra, especially in the back of the ambulance when, if the stuff is hitting the fan and you're saying your mantra. Trust is a big part. I always say the way knows the way. But also for the listeners, the difference about what we're talking about today, prayer is thought going out. Meditation is listening back as well. So there's a difference between, in the brain science shows us that there is a difference between praying for what we want, but then listening back for what we need. So, I always just say it's the path to liberation. Meditation is that central part of the path of liberation, or some may even know it as nirvana. I mean, I'm from Seattle, so we know nirvana, the group here, but it's leading to that state of that profound wisdom and that freedom from suffering by cutting it off at the root. And life is just, in general, is just stressful without doing anything. Just being here, it's stressful. So you might as well use these tools. So, Marcy, I could talk to you for another hour. These episodes go by so very quick, but I just want to ask, what inspires you, or who inspires you, and what philosophy from your perspective would you like to leave my listeners with today?
Well, we see and hear quotes about Rumi all the time in meditation, right? Mm-hmm. Rumi is another one of our anchors, I guess I'll say. I think we can sum it up, or I can sum it up in this way. He said, we come spinning out of nothingness, scattering stars like dust, and your soul knows all. So there's that soul word that you and I love to connect with, right? We can come spinning out of the universe, scattering stars like dust, and if we can just tune into our soul, we've come home. It is home. Home is meditation is a sanctuary for me, and every time I sit down and do my practice, I come home to my sanctuary.
Coming home. I love that. You see, even just taking that divine breath after you said that just was kind of nice, right? So, Marcy, it's been a pleasure having you on the show today. If you get new work or new books, again, her book is Searching for Sanity: How I Overcame Crisis with Mindfulness, and how you can too. So you'll want to check out that book, or any of her retreats that she's leading. You can go to the stillstatemeditation.com website to get more information, or again, any of our social media pages. We have all of her contact information on there as well. But is the stillstatemeditation.com the best site to get a hold of you for anybody listening to the show and wants to go forward or go deeper to prospect for?
Yes, absolutely. Definitely. Yeah, that's the easiest way.
Perfect. Well, Marcy, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Thank you for all that you do, and the light and the inspiration and the knowledge and the wisdom that you bring forth into our very chaotic world. It's been a pleasure having you on the show today. Thank you very much.
Mark, thank you so much. It's a pleasure.
All right, inspired listeners, until our next soul adventure together, be kind, be caring, be compassionate, and most importantly, wherever you're at in the world, dare to dream, dare to explore, dare to live, and discover the diamond within. We'll see you next time here on Inspired Living.